So back in 1953, the dean of the Washington National Cathedral wrote a piece called The Parable of the Crude Little Life-Saving Station. It was just a tiny hut with one boat, but a small group of faithful members kept watch for those who might be lost at sea. Over time, so many were rescued that the station gained quite a following, and folks supported its ministry by volunteering their time and making donations. As the station grew, some members felt that the newly rescued should have a more comfortable first refuge, so they replaced the building, and it became nice enough to be a gathering place, too. But as it happened, the more folks gathered socially, the less they wanted to go out on actual rescues. But fortunately, there were outside agencies who could do the life-saving work on their behalf. Eventually, conflict arose within the membership. Some wanted to drop life-saving activities altogether. It was effortful and uncomfortable, and it cut into the social life of the club. But other members insisted that life-saving was their primary mission, and that their integrity was at stake. They were voted down. So that group split off and founded a new station with a slightly different name, but over time, the same conflict arose among those members, as it was becoming less of a mission and more of a club. So it split again, and yet another station was founded, and thus the pattern repeated again and again. But the splinter stations grew smaller until many of them faded altogether. Thing is, the need for rescue had not changed. Shipwrecks were still frequent in those waters, but there was no longer any life-saving mission. There were, however, quite a few clubs. And with that, a lot of people drowned. Well, in today's gospel, it seems that James and John have lost sight of the mission, too. This may or may not seem surprising, but it is disheartening, especially from those who experienced so much of Jesus firsthand, including his frequent and dramatic breaks with tradition. Traveling to places they were taught not to go, healing on the Sabbath, touching the sick and those deemed unclean, flashing his temper publicly and upending the temple marketplace, calling out those in power over corruption and greed, and teaching that the practice of prayer can be as simple as a heartfelt, personal conversation with God. And they've repeatedly heard Jesus teach that joy comes not by receiving, but giving, that greatness comes not by control, but in service. Even unto his very last meal, by picking up a towel and bending low to wash the feet of his friends, Jesus gives for all of time the message at the very heart of Christian wisdom, that whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be servant of all. Well, James and John have been intimately part of this, and yet what they ask Jesus for is special status. They want designated positions of importance at his right and left hand. They focus on themselves and thus forget their call to serve others. It's an easy thing to forget. And we know they are not alone. Today's gospel reminds us that good and well-meaning people, the very church itself, can become gradually insulated from the world it is called to serve. The walls of a magnificent building might muffle the cries of those drowning in the sea right outside those doors. The sea of poverty, sickness, oppression, and hunger, both spiritual and physical. Church walls might muffle the sound of people drowning, yes, drowning in unjust circumstances or other trouble, but also drowning in the relentless demands of ego and attainment, drowning in anxiety or confusion. Young and old, there are those in this very moment longing for the solid ground of purpose, meaning, and hope under their feet. And today's gospel also reminds us that no faith community is immune to the risk of becoming a club. We must take good care not to become content with making ritual over taking action. So let us help each other remember why we are here and who we are called to follow. Let us help each other avoid the historic tendency for the church to become a club. Even as we properly and faithfully tend the health and future of our beautiful building, let us also remind one another why she is here. Let us keep in mind that to talk about Christian wisdom is to talk about the paradox Jesus constantly calls forth, that joy comes not by receiving, but in giving, and that greatness comes not by superiority, but in humility. And as we remember our call to servanthood, let us also remember whose servants we are, so that Trinity Church might always hear the cries of those feeling swallowed up by the everyday storms and raging seas of this life. Let us help remember to keep this place a life-saving station, because God knows there are already enough clubs. Amen.